And I will start with Jane Rossiter Smith, and it's in relation to the agreement between the City of Cambridge and the North Pole.
Sorry, I understand.
Ice skating.
Yeah. Sorry.
It's not broadening out of the city deal arrangements. Councillor Reid.
So I just would say I would have an interest to declare because I'm a trustee of the CLIC, which is the proposed new High Street on Newmarket Road. So it has links with the Parker's East High Street as well.
Okay, so I'll read the question in full. Is the agreement between the City of Cambridge and the North Pole ice skating in the public domain? What is the financial benefit to the city of the North Pole ice skating? Do you take that question?
Yeah, I can answer that question. There hasn't been any formal request as yet for the release of the agreement. If there was, I would write to Richard to state to him the intent to release and for him to raise any objections to what may be in that contract or the agreement. Now we have already done that, and Richard has stated that he's happy for that to be released, so that's a little bit of formality. In terms of the financial benefit to the council, those are set out in the schedules in the agreement. And for this year, the financial forecast is not yet set. However, we are on a profit share up to £25,000.
Do you want to follow up question on that? Can you just get your mic? Is there a mic? There we go. There's one on your table.
Oh, hello, I am Jane Rossiter Smith. What is the profit share? Is it 50-50 or what is it?
Yeah, it's 50-50 on net. So after all expenses, we get half of whatever's made up to a cap limit of 25,000, and after that we don't get anything.
And when will you know what the profit is for this season?
Yeah, the target date for that is the 28th of February.
And will that be published somewhere, or how can one find it?
That could be, we could publish that, yes.
Okay, thank you very much.
So, Councillor Big and then the gentleman at the back.
Could I ask if the City Council charged a rent for the use of the space on Parker's East, and whether that is one of the costs involved?
Okay, we'll take the gentleman at the back and then Alistair can...
Sorry, I just wanted to check also the cost of renovation of Parker's Piece, because it's left in an appalling state. It's going to be out of use effectively for another, say, 3, 4, maybe 6 months. It's an area which is completely unusable, and if that is weighed up against the earnings which the council have earned against the reinstatement costs.
Okay, so the first one is the rent, and then the second one is kind of the amenity value and the loss of amenity value as a result of the condition of the grass.
Answer those questions. In terms of the rent, there's no specific rent paid. It is dealt with through the agreement itself. So the agreement, the Schedule 1, which sets out the fee payable, is in effect the rent. With regards to the amenity value and the reinstatement of the site, yes, it is out of use for a long period. Again, exceptional year, exceptional weather conditions, has made reinstatement particularly difficult. In terms of the loss of the value, yes, there is a loss in terms of using it for recreation and access to recreation. However, I'm also very mindful that we've had over 80,000 people use that space in a 6-week period who've also had recreational value from the same space.
So we'll come back to this item in item 6. So what I'm proposing to do is move on to other questions, but certainly we will come back to this item in item 6. And I'll hand over to Alistair to lead off on the North Pole experience.
Well, thank you very much for the opportunity to discuss and receive feedback on last year's ice rink. The rink itself was very popular, over 80,000 visitors, And like any event in the city, we have received feedback on a range of issues and that some people experience as a consequence. The wettest December on record brought with it a whole raft of challenges and issues for us. Some of them we're still dealing with at the moment. The feedback to the council that we received, we've shared with Richard from Icebox, and along with Richard's feedback he received from his participants, we've got a lot of valuable information. So in terms of the types of things that have been raised with the council, we've had some concerns raised with us about noise, about the perimeter fence and choice of perimeter fence, the inclusion of what some people feel is a significant funfair, obviously the damage to the grass, which we're still dealing with, some issues around light pollution, and some concerns about the length of time that the North Pole event is on Parker's Piece. So we're very keen to get further feedback to help us with the planning of the future event. The contract is a 5-year contract, now in its 4th year coming up. The contract allows us to take feedback received and to determine the future content of that event, its layout and the operation of the event. So there's opportunity to change. The contract itself allows an income to council, which we discussed on earlier. It's a fairly significant sum of money that we generate from the ice rink, and at the time it was the most favourable or advantageous to the City Council in terms of the income and the offer that is offered. So I intend to hand over now to Richard to explain last year's event, talk about what we've learned, how we intend to respond to the feedback we've already received, and how we're going to respond to the feedback we received this evening. So I'll hand over to Richard.
Thank you. Let me just give you a quick outline of the whole event and how it performed 2015. So the goals for us were to provide a family event in the heart of Cambridge, which was also suitable for all ages, because feedback around all this, we get a lot of, there's not enough for kids and there's not enough for teenagers. So we were trying to provide an event that pleased everyone. And it's also to attract a higher footfall in the Cambridge city centre. The benefits for Cambridge was it's a festive event for local, national and international audiences. We attracted all. It increased the footfall in the city centre and local businesses. It was a family-focused event within a very safe, friendly environment. And it was also a metropolitan event to compete with other local and national cities. So the standard of what we produce compared to other cities in the area, it's up there with the best of them. We all know the attractions. We had the open air ice rink, the Santa's Grotto, a number of high-profile rides, the carousel, the Starflyer, which you saw from a distance. We had 14 odd other rides and games. We had the food court, the open air bar. The facts and figures, we do a survey every year after the event and we get a very good response. We had 826 people respond to this survey that goes out. But with regards to the marketing, we had 120 pieces nationally on online, print, TV and radio. The total reach was over 20 million people with those 120 pieces. And the coverage, to buy that kind of coverage, you're looking at about £400,000 odd pounds. So the PR for the city, it goes out global. We were voted #1 thing to do on a Sunday in the Times. So it's got a very good reputation. Visitor attraction figures, over 30,000 skaters. We had over 40,000 tickets sold to the rides and the games. We had over 15,000 people served in the food and drink outlets. And we had over 1,300 children visit Santa. We had footfall counters on the gates and sort of weeding out the repeat visits that we do statistically. We had over 80,000 unique visitors through the gates throughout the whole event. The survey results, 66 people rated the North Pole good or excellent. 76 people rated the staff attitude good or excellent. 35%
only visited Cambridge city centre because of the North Pole. And out of those 35%, 53% went on to spend money in Cambridge outside of the North Pole. 65% are more than likely to recommend the North Pole. So the conclusions are we provided the family event which was suitable for all ages, we increased the footfall into Cambridge, we boosted local business, and the lessons learnt, we are going to review the outer safety fencing, safety first. We're going to provide extra hard standing from roadways. We couldn't predict the wettest winter on record. It had, well, you saw the results of it. We always knew that Parker's Piece was going to have to be reinstated. Every park in the country that has an event like this on it has reinstatement. The Royal Park, Hyde Park, has an area in there at the moment that trucks needed pulling out in 2 foot of mud that's around 20 times the size as Parker's Piece. So, you know, every park that want to put on an attraction has to have reinstatement. That's a fact. It's never going to change. We are going to increase the food offering, make it a bit more appropriate to the area, and revamp the Santa's Grotto. So that's a bit of a summary of where we're at.
Okay, shall we open it up to questions? This if we start with the gentleman with the glasses, because you had a question specifically, so... Should be.
Okay. My name is David Crowder. I live in Melbourne Place, and I've lived there for more than 40 years. I generally welcome having a nice skating rink on Parker's Piece. And until this year, it's been a definite asset. It's been not too noisy, fits in well, and it's been a delight to see people enjoying themselves on it. One of the things I think was a great change this year was the sea mine side. And I think next year we could get it a little bit more so we could actually participate. But our main complaint this year was to do noise. Because previous years this hasn't really been a problem, but this year I think part of it was the size. For example, the PA public address system was much louder than it needed to be. You could hear every word. Even if you close all the windows and find some room away from the bicycle now, and still it's far too persistent and much louder than it needed to be. The other thing was the music was louder, partly perhaps because it was a larger area. And there's always, I think, the attempt to make music louder as a way of trying to attract people to it. I think that needs to be to bear in mind the effect on all of those residents around. I especially mentioned the heavy metal deep bass sound, which this year was intolerable. Much louder than it's ever been. And it really is very difficult to live with. And bear in mind that what might be acceptable, and even then, not that acceptable, for a weekend event, this is going on for 6 weeks, which at the time when there should be peace and quiet during Christmas time, that the noise, the PA system and the heavy metal was really too much. And our main question is, can something be done to ensure this does not happen next year?
Yeah, sure. Why don't you take that question and then we'll... This is quite an extensive one.
Yes. In terms of the numbers we've received, in terms of the complaints, the significant one is about noise, which is surprising to me, because there's only one recorded formal noise complaint with environmental health. Now, I think the possible solution to this, and I've queried 1 or 2 people about why they didn't raise the issue with us, it was the fact that they didn't know how to. So what I'm suggesting we may do for next year is certainly look at a letter drop to the close vicinity, to the close neighbourhood, so people have a point of contact should they experience a noise outbreak. I think also something that Rich and I will look at and we'll do an autopsy on is that the music system was all wired to one point. So all the music should be the same through the whole site to avoid the need to ramp up the noise. So I'd be interested to know if or not that possibly may have been breached that caused you the problem, particularly the heavy metal, the heavy bass type music, because the music was supplied by Heart FM. It was supposed to be of a family nature, fairly low key. And I'm surprised, I'm a bit disappointed if that has been the case of breakout.
Okay. Any other questions? So this gentleman here, do take the mic, and then I have Councillor Gearing, I have Councillor Gillespie, on a lot of hands going up. So we'll take those three first, and then I've noted the cluster of hands on the table in the middle there. So if we start with this gentleman.
Thank you. My name is Stefan Schulte, and I have the unique opportunity to report because we live directly facing Parker's Piece. All right? With respect to what the gentleman said, the ice rink was a lovely attraction. It was the rest that was a virtual nightmare because of the strobe lighting, what I would call, I don't want to call it rock and roll, but it sure wasn't sedate music. It was way too loud. The bass was incredible, and we have double glazed windows that were closed, all right? And you could hear it through there. Now, what struck me, because we could look into the fun fair, was the amount of people that attended. I wouldn't disagree with the numbers that you had, but I would be curious to know what percentage came for the ice rink and what percentage came for the fun fair. It seems to me, I agree 100%, I would be happy or thrilled with an ice rink that was twice the size, all right, lasted for 12 weeks or the whole winter, all right, and was the kind of attraction that really was an asset and not something that would be, cause so many problems.
Okay, we'll take Councillor Gillespie, Councillor Gearing, and then Councillor Gillespie, then we'll come back and let us answer.
Yes, Councillor Gearing, I had a question for both the operator and the city here, because you must have seen that your attractions are slowly sinking into the ground. So not to act is maybe cavalier and maybe endangering a very precious city asset if we not see it in such friendly light. So I don't understand why the city, when you see the cars are being parked there, of the people working in the attraction, are sinking deep into the mud. Why no one is reacting? And then the executive councillor stands up and says, no, the attraction is paying for their reconditioning of Parker's Piece. That was a lie, because you just shared with us that it was a sharing agreement for the city. Now the city is basically paying the price, because if the net profit is reduced through the reconditioning, it's going to be the city that coughs up half the price of the reconditioning. So how do you explain the Executive Council's statement that it's the attraction paying? It's not the attraction paying, it's the city paying.
Okay, Councillor Gillespie, then we'll take those questions.
That is a good point, Councillor Gearing. I wasn't surprised to hear a councillor in South Cambridge say that the fun fair should continue, because that's what we expect from them. But I was surprised. I was surprised to hear the executive councillor say that it should continue, because I thought that Labour believed more in localism, and that they would be willing to let the people who live near the site have more of a say in it. Yeah, but I don't think there are any Labour representatives here to argue otherwise. So,
We did invite the executive council.
right. In the list of points made about the funfair, there is something about the distance of the compound from the path and the amount of cycle parking provided as well. But most of all, I think the suitability of the fair for the area is the thing that strikes me. I travel through there regularly. It's right by a heritage area. It's in a historic city, and I thought it was outrageous. It's been like trying to cram Alton Towers into what was previously a quaint little ice rink. So if it was up to me, I wouldn't allow the same operator to run the ice rink next year. I think it shows remarkably bad judgment to put on something with so much sound and light.
Okay,
and
so
the final point about that is, yes, there were record levels of rain last December, and that's why we need to be cutting down on things that have such profligate use of light and sound, because we need to be using less energy in order to preserve the climate.
okay, so there's quite a lot of people who want to comment on this point. So if Alistair can give some responses to those three questions, then we'll move on. There's a cluster of people on that table. I then have two people on this table. I have the gentleman at the back and Councillor Bick. So we'll keep going on this item for a little while, but if people can be concise in their questions, that would be great. So Alistair, strobe lighting, not sedate music. That was the first question. Second point was this whole point in terms of the putting back of the grass and the surface, and in effect the city shared that liability because we're kind of in a profit sharing scheme. And then the final point was from Councillor Gillespie in relation to the distance of the compound from the path, the cycling, the suitability of it basically on that particular location. So those I think were the key points from those questions.
In terms of just taking the lighting and the music's the first points, those were quite stringently covered by our planning conditions, so we'll need to revisit those just to make sure we didn't breach those and consider how we may make changes or adaptations of betterment from next year. I think one of the questions was asked about the number of participants who didn't use the fun fair. And Richard's figures. The actual number of people who didn't actually use the fun fair was a third of those that visited. So 2/3 came for the ice rink. So, but in terms of the fun fair itself, it is quite an integral part of the offer because it actually does add to the profitability of the venture. To have an ice rink solely on its own, the City Council would probably have to make a contribution to the costs of bringing that to the city. It's not unusual because there's in quite high demand for operators to request a fee from the City Council. When we considered the offer from Icebox, there were several other alternatives to us, offers available to us, which did involve having to pay a cost and pay a fee to attract it to the city. With regards to the ground and why the ground is in such poor condition, the actual operation of the event itself, the actual day-to-day operation of the event, during the period of the event, there's no health and safety issues with people visiting. The actual damage came at the end, and it wasn't the fun fair that caused the significant damage at the end, it was the actual frequency and the number of visits we had to make over the site to clear and de-rig the event. There was a considerable infrastructure on site, amounting to many items that had to be moved over wet ground, and that's what caused the most significant damage. With regards to paying, yes, it is part of the costs associated with the event, and it will come out of the net profit at the end. However, we didn't forecast this level of requirement to reinstate as a consequence of very heavy wet weather. The fact that it came at a very wrong time of year for us to getting the site off-site, get the equipment off-site, and we'll maybe have to look at how we invest in additional roadway and additional facilities to make sure we don't damage the surface, because most of the issues with Parker Space are not about the actual the dying of the surface, the actual churning of the surface, the fact we've actually caused the damage by vehicle movement over the soil. With regards to the compound and its proximity to the path and its suitability, a lot of these, or most of, if not all of these issues were dealt with through the planning application. And with regards to the looking at reducing our carbon footprint from the event, Richard and I have had a discussion about installing a electric supply, a water supply onto Park Space, which will then reduce and negate the need to run diesel generators that run fossil fuels. So, in terms of reducing our carbon footprint for next year, it may well be that we can go on to a green tariff for mains feed at cost, Iceberg's cost.
Can I comment on a few things?
Just a couple of things missed there. The fence. Unfortunately, we do have to have a fence because there's high voltage electricity behind the scenes, there's generators, there's moving parts. That fence was more for safety. I can't operate an event that's wide open. In 2012, we still had a fence back at house. It was a Harris fence, a wide fence. Now, the wind that goes through Parker's Piece can pick up those wire fences and twist them like undoing a sweet. You put a bit of mesh on there to try and block out the back of house. You know, you can't. The generators, they're ugly. The chillers, they're ugly. You try and block it out, and it turns the fence into a kite, and it's extremely dangerous. So, as Hyde Park do, as events in East London, as we did, there's a product on the market called Steel Shield, which is green, the same colour as the grass. It is the only product on the market that will stand up to the wind of Parker's Piece. I would never ever put an event on Parker's Piece without a fence. You can't have people wandering in from all directions. It's completely unsafe. Yes, it's not the most attractive fence. I'll be the first to admit that. We're working on a plan this year to decorate the fence because we need a fence. I can't put any other fence up. And there's a cost associated to it as well. It needs to be commercial. It was beautiful when there was just an ice rink in the middle of Parker's Piece. It really was. It was idyllic. I loved it. But that year, 2012, cost me personally, it was my company, over £55,000 out of my own pocket. That's how much I lost. If you want an ice rink in Cambridge, it has to be commercial. It has to make money because the council won't pay for an ice rink. Other councils do. I've been paid by other councils significantly not to take a risk on an ice rink. But that's not the deal I've got, that I've committed to. So in order for it to work, in order for it to have an ice rink, that I would love it 3 times the size and just have an ice rink, but there's not a footfall. This city can't support just an ice rink. And that's why the fun fair's been added. So, won't take anything you said personally. You need to understand the facts and figures before you make those comments. But if you want an ice rink, you either pay me to come and do it, you pay any other operator to come and do it, or you're simply not going to have an ice rink, you know. And 80,000 odd people want an event in the middle of the city. They want an ice rink.
Okay, so we have a lot of people want to comment, which is great. So I'm going to extend this out till 8:15. So if people be concise, so we'll start with the cluster of comments on this middle table. So, yeah, Councillor Nasinga, and then Ed, and Beth.
I'd very, very quickly like to echo. Is that right?
You are,
Is that better? Just to echo the points that were made about how lovely it was in the earlier years and this year, I took my children in the first 2 years it was there and we had a lovely time, and I did not take them this year because I did not want to go ice skating in the middle of a fun fair. My question has been partly answered actually. There was a promise at the beginning, what was said at the beginning was if there was a profit, the City Council would have a profit share up to £25,000. And my question has been going to be, in the previous years when there wasn't a fun fair, was there a profit? And actually what we've already heard is that in the first year there was a £55,000 loss. So I think the question that we have to ask is, is this event, does it make sense to have this event if it's just a fun fair? If the question was, are we going to have a fun fair, would that have happened? And I think the answer is no. So then we have to ask, is the fun fair worth having an ice rink? And I don't think, I mean, it doesn't sound as if we've got the figures yet, but actually making a case for this on the basis that it's bringing in money to the city, it doesn't sound to me as if it has been. And if I'm wrong about that, I would really like to know. But from what we've heard so far, it has not brought money into the city. So if you can put some more flesh on that, I'd be really interested about what happened in the second.
We'll just do some questions. So if we take 3 questions and then we'll get some responses. So comments, questions?
So, Richard, you said that it's helped the reputation of the city. A lot of people spoke to me, and a lot of people who live in Cambridge, but also who visit Cambridge seasonally, not one of them agreed with your view. I think actually you've damaged the reputation of Cambridge in terms of a place to come for a seasonal, and I don't doubt that people who came enjoyed it, but actually when you came and spoke to us some 5 years ago, you set out a vision for the ice pole which was not this. It was not a huge fun fair given consent for longer than any other length of time. So I would take that back to you, that does this fit with your vision? Also, do you think it's appropriate that there's a car park on Parker's Piece for 2 months for 12 to 15 vehicles, interestingly hidden from view, but nevertheless there because I saw them and photographed them? And also, I find it utterly extraordinary, Alistair, that because people haven't formally complained over the Christmas period, that you don't see that there would have been a sound issue. Why didn't environmental officers come to the boundaries of Parker's Piece and check for themselves? Given the magnitude of the fun fair that you've given consent to, presumably, and you understood how the sound was going to be set up, that it may well be heard. And I assure you, it was very much heard. And finally, why do you think that those hoardings would have helped the offer and the attraction? I mean, I find it extraordinary that you're saying, in effect, for financial reasons, that it was okay to put a huge industrial green hoarding over Parker's Piece for 2 months. I mean, surely it would be in your interest to make it look as attractive as possible. It was also slightly unfortunate that the fairy lights that were put round ended up looking like barbed wire. So it really did look like a military compound in the middle of Parker's Piece. And, you know, a lot of people feel it's damaged the reputation of our city.
Okay. Do you want a quick comment? I'm going to actually take some more questions before going back, because there are quite a lot of people. So, and then I'm coming over to this table, then Councillor Bick, Councillor Reid, then we'll take some answers, then there's another batch of people who have questions as well. So if we can be concise, I know this is a very important issue, and I want to try and get everybody to have a comment, but I do want to move on shortly. So Beth. Beth, sorry.
Mostly it's a slightly more general point, and it's mostly addressed to Mr. Wilson. I mean, I appreciate that there will be some vehicle movement on Parker's Piece over the year. I'm talking about over the year. But is there no flexibility over how many? What distressed me most about the the aftermath of the Icebox event and the event previously, which I think was the Freshers' Fair, was just the amount of damage that had been done to the grass. And I wonder, is there any way we can reduce the amount of damage we do to the grass, rather than just go, oh well, it's just inevitable, we'll just damage the grass and then reinstate it, because that doesn't seem like a responsible attitude.
Okay. This table I had Penny, then I had Councillor Maurice. Yes? No?
Yeah, I mean,
just
the point that we're going all around the shop, and why is there not a sort of debriefing session for all the residents who have concerns, which principally seem to be about noise and light? And rather than us all articulating all our views about the North Pole, could there not be a meeting convened for residents and interested parties, and we simply get specific things sorted out. And one of them is principally noise pollution and light pollution.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. I mean, we certainly used to have that with the with Strawberry Fair, which was very good actually. So, but given where we are, I think it's important that I understand, but it is important that people have an opportunity to have their say, because this is an important issue. So, if I can just, if people can bear with me, we go to Penny, and then this lady here, and then we'll take Councillor Bick, Councillor Reid, and then we'll go back to.
Yeah, okay. The point I wanted to make, I'm aware there's a Labour corporate vision document, and it talks about maximising economic benefits from business and tourism, delivering programme of outdoor and public events and activities. And I can see it's a policy, but I get slightly nervous that this is what they call driver, a fiscal driver from tourism. And this icebox project, there's a throwaway remark in the paper that I'm not sure it's a council or something saying, it doesn't matter, it'll all be right by the spring and summer, as if the market was for summer tourism, when actually it is about localism, people in the winter. And I just like to raise that. I think perhaps we haven't quite got this right. It needs a bit more sensitive policy behind it.
This lady here.
I wonder about the statistics for the number of people who stayed overnight in Cambridge, if you're concerned about getting lots of value from tourism. Did you collect any statistics about the number of people who stayed overnight?
Okay.
I have another point to make. The proportion of land, you also referred to these big events in Hyde Park and so on, but the proportion of land that is affected by this event is very high on Parker's Piece. The length of time that it's put out of action to the general public is also long. And I was a bit mortified to hear Mr. Wilson mention something about improving the roadworks for next year. I think this is to get things entirely the wrong way around, to think that Parker's Piece should be further adapted as an open space to accommodate enormous heavy vehicles. That's all.
Good. Councillor Reid, then we'll go back with some feedback.
Mr. Chair, I admit, I'm proud to say that I was one of the people who was originally involved in bringing an ice rink to the city a few years ago, and I remain convinced that it is a positive asset to have an ice rink in the city over Christmas. But I think if you ask anyone to do with the council, they would believe that the council wanted an ice rink, and what we've actually got is a fairground with an ice rink in it, because you could go through the gates behind the barricades, and you actually still couldn't see at the entrance where the ice rink was, and you had to walk around to find it. And it's really become quite different from what I think the council originally thought it had brought into it. And for that reason, I do think it should be said that it is a pity that Councillor O'Reilly, who has accountability for this, isn't here as invited this evening, because it's important that she hears what people have to say about this, because it is something that seems to me that's strategically gone off target. And I think when I hear about the economics, and Richard Elmer and I have met each other before, and we've talked about this, and of course that there is an issue about the economics of this, and I think that the council should consider whether this is something that it should actually pay for to get what it wants. Because what it actually thinks it's getting is what it wants, but it's actually also getting whatever else it takes to pay for itself. And that seems to be changing all the time. Now, last time it didn't pay for itself on Parker's Piece. Mr. Elmer wanted to have it on Price Pieces, which would have been, I think, to most local people, be even less appealing a prospect, and that was said no to. And now it's back on Parker's Piece again. It has to have a bigger funfair with it. So there's something about the formula here which seems always to drive itself into something which is not what was originally wanted. And I think if the council went back and looked at actually what it would take, we might end up with a much better ice rink without all the hassle and problems that goes with it, and the criticisms from people in the city.
Okay, Councillor Reid, and then we're going to go back and get some comments, then we'll quickly come back to final comments from the audience, and then we need to move on.
I've got sort of two suggestions to make. The first is that there is a West Central Area Committee in September. And my suggestion is that Alistair Wilson and the operator come back to this committee and report back on what the plans are for next winter, so that people here can really scrutinise whether or not all the plentiful feedback that's been given has been taken on board, and whether some kind of reasonable proposition has been come up with. So I would like this matter to come back for proposals to come back to this committee for scrutiny in line with the localism point that Councillor Gillespie and others have made here. The second thing, which is just picking up on comments from the table here, is that I do think that in terms of the tourism economy, I think it might be worth at another area committee asking Councillor O'Reilly, who's a board member of the new tourism organisation, and Councillor Matthew Shooter, who is also on the board, to come to this committee and present how they're running, how the new tourism organisation is being run, and whether it is respecting all the kind of environmental and quality of life issues that we've seen raised here, but actually are relevant in many ways to do with managing the visitor and tourism economy. So those are two suggestions about future area committee events.
Very good. And then very quickly coming back, so our first few questions, one was, it was an event which was just a fun fair. The second one was no one agreed that it was the view of it being a seasonal attraction. Number of vehicles parked, 12 to 15 during the period. The sound issue. The hoardings did not help the offer, and the acceptance of those hoardings for financial reasons. Another point was the vehicular movements on Parker's Piece, no flexibility, how many. The intensified use of Parker's Piece, such as the Freshers' Fair, the amount of danger to the grass. I think that's one for you, Alistair. Debriefing session for residents, like a wash-up, which I think is a very good idea, but I think we should have it after the end of February, once the financial information is available, so that there's full transparency of what the financial position is. But I'll certainly take that up separately.
Can I just make a point? Not just as an area committee.
No. We'd have a proper wash-up like we used to do on Strawberry Fair. So yeah, area committee's open to all residents as well. Just this. So Labour corporate vision, the fiscal driver for tourism and making money out of tourism. What were the statistics for people staying overnight, and also the proportion of the land used relative to the total amount of Parker's Piece, length of time, and also the imposition of road works for next year, whether that actually is going to happen. And also to invite Councillor O'Reilly back to discuss the economics in terms of the ice rink and the whole issue of what it is that the city really wants.
Sorry, I meant to actually...
Now there's Councillor Bick's comment. I haven't got to your comments yet.
Sorry.
And then separate to that, to come back to the West Central in September for next year's scheme, and then also for Councillor O'Reilly to come back in relation to the broader tourism and economic activity of the city, and also all those issues around green issues, sustainability issues of that proposition.
And Councillor Shooter from
Councillor Shooter as well.
Transport issues. Around, so really.
Okay, so very quickly, if you could give some.
I think what I'd like to start to say is that we do want to make improvements to this offer. And the information we're getting back this evening is really invaluable and really very helpful. I would dearly love to come back in September to West Central to talk about what we've learned and what we're proposing to do and change. And I'll make that commitment that both Richard and I will happily do that, to come back and talk you through what's proposed for 16-17. With regards to some of the questions, particularly around the financing of the agreement, up to the point when Richard was the preferred supplier, the old operator had always worked on a no rent arrangement, so we didn't actually charge them any rent because we knew there was significant costs in operating an ice rink. Richard's deal is a profit share, and that profit share increases on an annual basis by £5,000 to a point where the City Council could be earning up to £50,000 in any given 1 year. With regards to the points regarding noise, again, I think we've got some significant learning to do there in terms of how we avoid breakout and noise breakout. Just to answer a specific question about environmental health, they did attend and they deemed that no action was required at that time. We've only had one known complaint recorded regarding noise, although feedback from a range of people would indicate that it's a significant issue that we need to address. With regards to the economics and the benefits of the city, I'm not best placed to answer that. Possibly Richard has more detail, a bit more help in terms of the commerce and the benefit to the city. I hear the points about is the ice rink meeting what we're required to do in terms of the economics, and that's something I can discuss with the Executive Councillor. The number of people that stayed overnight, we don't have that information. We may be able to get it indirectly through Visit Cambridge and Beyond. They may be able to help us with that information. With regard to the land use, it equates to about 15 to 20% of the use of Parker's Piece for the duration of 6 weeks. The work is now almost finished in terms of the renovation, and we should be able to reduce the footprint of the scarring, for want of a better word, and the repair area, and that should be complete possibly by tomorrow, depending on how favourable the weather conditions are for us. I hope I've covered most things there. I'm sure I must have missed something, but Richard's got anything he wants to add?
Financially, 2012, we didn't do it in 13 because obviously we were too late. 2014, it contributed to the council about £13,000. This year it will contribute to the council. I'm yet to have my own wash up because the costs are still coming in, and we just obviously need to confirm the cost of the reinstatement, but it will contribute to the council. I can't remember all the questions as well, only a few. With regards to the attractions sinking in the mud, no they didn't. There was no digging up of the mud at all until the very end of the event when we collected 50 pallets of rubber matting with the telehandler that we had. We had the wrong tyres on it, and that proved to do a lot of the digging up. So if 80% of that ground that was dug up was done in the last 3 to 4 days. That was if you refer back to 2014 when we left, I'm sure none of you had the same issues that you had with when we left in 2015, and that's because of the rain. We didn't plan for the rain, and it caught us off guard. We put my hand up for that. What we have to do now is account for the rain. And when we talk about adding the roadway, we have to have a look at what roadway we need to add in there, because we can't use the cycle paths and the footpaths, so we try and put our own roadway in there as well. So I need to look at doubling that up so we can make sure that it doesn't leave the compressions in the ground that it did. So with regards to tarnishing Cambridge's reputation, I mean, I can only go on the poll and the survey that I've got and the quality of the event, and like I said, 35% of the people that attended the North Pole only came to Cambridge because of the North Pole. So, you know, I only go on the facts and the figures that I had in front of me, and you know, the 80,000 people that attended the event. So, with regards to my vision for the event, I always knew that it was going to have to grow to support, because I've done this in other cities. And like I said, unless we're going to be paid on a no-risk basis, this is what has to happen. With regards to this year, I'm going to reduce the footprint, I'm going to reduce the rides, I'm going to try and make it a bit more of an intimate event. I'll take on board all your comments. I'm going to have a look at the steel shield. It'll be the same, because there's no other product out there that we can use that is suitable, and safety comes first, and I will argue that every day of the week. we're going to have a look at how we decorate it, how we decorate that steel shield to make it appropriate. And there'll be less of it. We are going to dramatically bring it in and reduce it down, and probably reduce the ride by 40-odd%, take it down from 17 down to roughly 11. So, you know, we're not going to turn a blind eye. We're going to listen to what you've all said. So it's work in progress. Off the top of my head, I can get a calculator out if you want me to be precise. I didn't know.
Given the pressure of items this evening, we're not going to discuss percentages in detail. I was just going to come on to parking. So just a point on parking, the number of vehicles on the site, is that, because that's normally, I think in the past we've seen 1 or 2 max in terms of previous, so is that possible to comment on that?
I can comment on that. I think if you look at the amount of employment that we bring to Cambridge over that festive period, it's quite high, and they're normally, well, I wouldn't say it's minimum wage, it's quite well paid, but obviously we need to give them somewhere to park. Yes, there was 12 to 15 cars on certain days, and yes, it was behind a closed compound. So I can't be naive about I need to provide a bit of welfare for my employees. I would love to do a deal with the Queen Anne car park and try and get some car parking spaces. Unfortunately, that deal didn't come through. I could have a reduction in the cost. You know, they were out of sight, out of mind. We had them on as much hard standing as we could, but unfortunately there was a bit of overflow. That's something that we're going to have a look at this year with regards to parking.
Okay. Now, I'm really conscious of time. We've been on this item for 35 to 40 minutes. I know other people have got comments, but what I'm going to suggest is that, if I may, not take those comments, because I think the idea of a wash-up is a very good idea. And so what I will do is I will take on the task to try and initiate that exercise separately outside this meeting, and so that enables everybody to have a very thorough opportunity to actually discuss with the officers, with the provider, and also with the executive councillor, who clearly has political responsibility for this activity on Parker's Piece.
I can especially for this.
No, I mean, I really appreciate that. I'm sure, unless you've got a unique comment that you want to add, then what I suggest is perhaps you can take that offline, because basically we are now 40 minutes late. There are other people who are joining this meeting for specific items, and I do feel that we've actually gone through some of the key items, and I recognise it may not satisfy everybody, and so therefore I do think a proper wash-up is something which is appropriate. Very similar.
Who will be invited to this wash-up meeting? How will that work?
Well, we will publicise it. I mean, let me just give you the illustration of the Special North Area Committee that happened on Milton Road. 300 people came to that, and that was as a result of a catalyst of this meeting, people turning up, and we said we would go away and create a special meeting for it. Yes, it was. No, it wasn't.
Issue for residents.
No, I'm sorry. The catalyst for that meeting was actually a requirement from this committee inviting the leader of the council to Milton Road. It was. Actually.
Well done. Congratulations.
So we can do the same on the wash-up, and we can invite people and people will turn up. So we move on.